In our previous episodes on the First Age of Middle-earth, we have discussed at length the first two great tales of the First Age, that of Beren and Lúthien and the Children of Húrin. In this episode, we will detail the earliest elements of this final great tale of the Fall of Gondolin, beginning with the coming of Tuor, son of Huor, and cousin of Túrin Turambar. Even in the absence of the direct curse of Morgoth placed upon Húrin and his children, the descendants of the House of Hador were to bring inadvertent and unintentional woe and destruction in their wake. However, in this instance, the end of the tale was to differ, and hope would once more be kindled through the actions of a single man who refused to bow to the overwhelming despair of his age. What if curses and consequences were not so inevitable? What if the timeline of Middle-earth was convoluted by the intervention of a new ring of power? That's what you'll see in The Lord of the Rings Heroes of Middle-earth, the new game from this video's sponsor Electronic Arts. It's a CRPG in which you collect Lord of the Rings characters to use in battle, both good and evil, reliving events from the canon storyline, but also original Tolkien-inspired stories, in which you, as a possessor of a ring of power that bends time itself, must visit and alter iconic moments from Middle-earth's past. Only by bringing together characters and creatures from across Middle-earth will you create perfect teams for each challenge you face, creating the ultimate Lord of the Rings universe crossovers. On June 26th, the first legendary character will be added to the game, Elrond. There will be a limited time legendary adventure event to unlock him, so before it starts, you need to collect at least 5 elven characters so you can take part. Get Elrond to use his healing abilities, including the ability to revive fellow elves, and he gets good synergies with his family members, like Elrohir, Elladan and Arwen. You can get the game for free right now by using our link in the description, or scanning the QR code on screen. Go prepare for the arrival of Elrond, and plenty more legendary characters in the future, in this new Lord of the Rings game. To continue our tale, we need to go back a bit to the time before the Fall of Doriath in the Second Kinslaying in the year 506. Our tale begins with the forebear of Tuor, Huor, son of Galdor and brother of Húrin, who, in their younger years in FA 458, campaigned against the Orcs as members of a war party. However, the two brothers were cut off from the rest of the warriors of their company within the Vale of Cirion. If not for the intervention of the Valar Ulmo, the brothers would have been slain. However, he did intervene, and a great mist arose, allowing them to escape into the then abandoned region of Dimbar. From here, a pair of great eagles picked the brothers up and brought them within the depths of the hidden vale to Gondolin, where King Turgon welcomed them. For Turgon still remembered the great prophecy set out by Ulmo, that the hidden city would be aided by the House of Hador, and the king asked the brothers to stay. However, they would not be separated from their kinsmen for long, and with a heavy heart, Turgon allowed the eagles to return the brothers to Dor-Lomin, on the basis that they swear an oath to keep the city's location a secret. Around FA 470, Huor was wed to Rian, a daughter of one of the other great houses of the Edain, Beor, and the pair soon conceived a son. Huor named the child Tuor even before his birth. He would never get to meet his firstborn, for a great muster had been called by the High King Fingon, and Huor left Dor-Lomin for the final time. During the Nirnaeth Arnoediad, Huor met Turgon once more during the battle. However, the joy of this reunion was short-lived, as the battle soon turned against the Union of Maedhros. In his final act, Huor stood side by side with his brother Húrin in a desperate rearguard action which saved the Gondolindrim host. Unfortunately, a poison arrow struck Huor in the eye, ending his life in an instant. Word of Morgoth's triumph was not long in reaching Dor-Lomin, and Rian despaired as she heard nothing of her husband's ultimate fate. And so she ventured forth to find him while still pregnant with Tuor. Alone in the great wilds of northern Beleriand, she would have perished with her unborn child if not for the intervention of the Grey Elves, who dwelt in the mountains to the west of Lake Mithrim. Within their domain, Tuor was born in FA 472. However, Rian could not stay and offered her farewell. Let him be called Tuor, for that name his father chose ere war came between us. and I beg of you to foster him and to keep him hidden in your care, for I forebode that great good for elves and men shall come from him, but I must go in search of Tuor, my lord." Before she could leave, the only grey elf who had answered Fingon's call, Anael, returned, bringing the news of the defeat. Tuor had fallen by his brother Húrin and lay among the piles of the slain, which now blighted the House Enendengin. Rian was heartbroken and went to find her slain husband, wherein she met her end upon the waste of the Anfalglyph. This left Tuor within the care of the Grey Elves. When he came into the fullness of his manhood, he embodied much of the great strength and valour of his cousin Húrin, without the dark cloud of despair which blighted all of his days in Beleriand. By this point, the situation in the north was becoming untenable. The Easterlings, betrayed by their Dark Lord and given naught more than the poor soil of Hithlum for their reward, began to take their frustrations out on the denizens of this region. At 16 years of age, Tuor was already a capable warrior and wished to make war upon these usurpers. However, Anael rejected such foolhardy notions. Instead, he would take his people south, through the Annuin-Giliath, or Gate of the Noldor, to lands in which those in his care would be free from the tremendous reach of the Dark Lord, if only for a time. Unfortunately for Tuor and the Grey Elves, their residence in the caves of Androth had been watched by the servants of the Dark Lord, and the Easterlings tracked their march south. Not long after leaving the caves, the elves were assaulted by a mighty force of orcs and Easterlings, causing the company to scatter and flee. Yet despite his elven upbringing, the blood of the House of Hador flowed freely through Tuor's veins, and long did he stand his ground, slaying a great many of his foes. But even a warrior of Tuor's strength could not hold back such a tide forever, and the ward of the Grey Elves was eventually captured and brought before Lorgan, the chief of the Easterlings, who decreed that he would hold the boy as a slave. For 3 years, Tuor endured the thraldom of Lorgan, who treated him worse than any other due to his noble birth, to break the young man and destroy the pride of the House of Hador, whose lands he had usurped. Tuor endured in the face of Lorgan's cruelty and grew even larger and stronger, yet most importantly, he was swifter now than any among the Easterlings. Therefore, when he was sent one day on an errand within the great forests of Hithlum, he turned on his captors and slew them with the axe he had been given to complete the task. From here he fled, yet Lorgan would not allow his thrall to escape so easily, and sent men and hounds after him. This proved fruitless, as during his captivity, Tuor had shown kindness to the hounds of the house, and when they came upon him, they would display naught but affection for him, until Tuor commanded them to return to their master. Tuor would make a home of sorts in the caves of Androth, and for 4 long years wreak havoc and devastation upon the Easterlings in the land of his fathers, slaying many of his would-be captors. However, he did not seek vengeance, and instead sought out the Gate of the Noldor so he could escape Hithlum, aware that the life of an outlaw did not lend itself to a long life. Ulmo once more intervened, and such intervention inspired Tuor to not tarry any longer, and to instead make with all haste for the gate, even though he had long been unable to come across it in his travels. For 3 days, Tuor followed the signs set out by Ulmo, and on the morning of the 4th day, he came across 2 elves, Gelmir and Amenas of Finarfin's people. The elves then led Tuor out of Hithlum, with Gelmir stating, "Through darkness one may come to light." Having brought Tuor from the darkness of Hithlum, the Noldor bade him farewell, and Tuor continued his journey southwards, whereby he came to Fëanor's landing point in Beleriand in the echoing mountains of Lammoth, about the Firth of Drengist. Tuor would then become the first member of the Edain to set his eyes upon the Great Sea, having followed the calls of the gulls, which had long been beloved of the Teleri Elves. For the gulls had led him to the very shores of the Great Sea Beligea the Shoreless, having passed beyond the borders of Nevrast. This awakened in Tuor a longing for adventures of a maritime nature which would never leave him, even as the days of Beleriand grew short and Morgoth's victory seemed inevitable. Tuor tarried a while in Nevrast, seeing that it was safe from the vile machinations of Morgoth, which even now brought ruin and despair to the free peoples through the curse placed upon the children of his uncle Húrin. Yet as this darkness spread ever further to the south, and the dying days of Nargothrond were soon to come to pass, the birds seemed to anticipate what was to be. For Tuor's peaceful existence in Nevrast was interrupted by the sound of great wings, as he witnessed 7 great swans flying in a wedge formation southwards. They wheeled about and plunged into the waters nearby as they began to pass over the Edain's head. Tuor greeted them, and before long they had set upon their journey once more, and so the man of Dor-Lomin now knew that he had tarried too long in Nevrast and followed their formation southwards. He would travel for 7 days before he came upon Mount Taras and the grand remnants of what was once the abode of Turgon, the halls of Vinyamar. The swans decided his path once more, for they had corrected their course and perched upon the highest terrace of the halls above the western door. Tuor entered through this door and was awestruck by the finely wrought halls, and even more so by the armour left behind the throne. The hauberk gleamed a great silver, untarnished by the decay of time. The shield was long and tapering in an odd design, however its field was blue, and upon it lay the emblem of a white swan's wing. Tuor accepted this elven-wrought finery, while issuing forth a challenge which would alter his fate forever. "By this token I will take these arms unto myself, and upon myself whatsoever doom they bear." Tuor would then array himself in the armour, taking with it the blade and great shield, before exiting the hall a changed man. This change was noticed even by the swans who had acted as his guide until this point, for each of them proffered a feather, and Tuor graciously decorated his helm with these 7 gleaming white feathers. The swans then left their perch and flew northwards, never to be seen again. Yet Tuor's feet now guided him, as he felt compelled to head to the shore. Here, Ulmo revealed himself to Tuor, making Huor's son the only man ever to be approached directly by a member of the Valar. Ulmo would then task Tuor with reaching Gondolin and warning Turgon of what was to come. As a parting gift, he gave to the Edain he favoured above all a great cloak, which would keep the eyes of the enemy from his path, and in doing so, ensure the secrecy of Gondolin was maintained. Ulmo then called upon a great storm, and Tuor sought refuge in the hall. As he awoke the next day, he came across an elf who had survived the storm, and the shipwreck which had brought him to the halls of Vinyamar. Tuor therefore made the acquaintance of Voronwy of the Noldor, and although he initially refused to bring Tuor to the gates of Gondolin, the word of Ulmo's task changed the elf's mind. Voronwy led his young companion westwards, up the steep slopes of the terrace, and down into the northern region of Fallas. From here, they then headed eastwards, to the eaves of the Ered Wethrin, where they rested and hid for a time from the roaming bands of orcs in the region. However, the cloak of Ulmo lay upon Tuor, and he questioned not the path decided upon by Voronwy as they continued ever eastwards towards Gondolin. The pair soon came to the pools of Ivrin, where they dwelt for a time. Here Voronwy despaired as to the devastation wrought by Glaurung during the destruction of Nargothrond, yet they were soon startled by the cries which could be heard within the surrounding woods. For a tall man clad in black, his face grief-stricken, and his blade black as midnight emerged, crying out, "Ivrin, Faelivrin, Gwyndor and Beleg, here once I was healed, but now never shall I drink the draught of peace again." Yet he did not tarry long, and quickly made for the north, and in this chance meeting, the destinies of Tuor and Húrin forever diverged, and no greater contrast can be drawn than that of the tale's end for these scions of the House of Hador. Their journey was to continue, as the pair endured the trials of their journey. Fortunately, however, this did not involve any one-sided encounters with the orcs, which now wandered freely through these lands. Tireless in their pursuit, and desperate to reach their destination with naught more than suffering and orcish warbands behind them, Tuor and Voronwy eventually came to the guarded gate of Gondolin. However, as Voronwy had predicted, The Gondolidrim, in order to preserve their very existence, stuck to the laws of their people, with an obedience which bordered on cruelty to those who dwelt outside the valley. Despite Faronwi's previous residence within the hidden city, the pair were taken prisoner and brought to the Warden of the Great Gate, who would decide upon their fates and the allowance of their entry into the city. However, this is a tale for our next video on the history of the First Age, which will focus on the betrayal of Maeglin and the fall of Gondolin proper. The next few videos in this series will be dedicated to the last desperate battles of this age before the sundering of Beleriand in the War of Wrath. But we're planning to cover the battles of many other fantasy, sci-fi and space opera universes, so make sure you have subscribed and pressed the bell button. Please consider liking and sharing, as it helps immensely, and don't forget to comment. We'll try to read and respond to every comment, as we want to know what you think about this video and which videos you hope to see in the future. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.